Hi, my name is Sharon.
Hi, my name is Ben.
And this is the Creative Odyssey Podcast.
We're here to talk about the creative process.
The good,
the bad,
and the ugly.
But more importantly,
we're here to create together.
Whether you're a creator, a dreamer,
or just curious about the creative process,
explore with us
as we figure out what it means to be a creative
and build a community
that celebrates the creative journey. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Creative Odyssey Podcast. We are so grateful for this opportunity today. We are with Charles and Kyra, and Charles, the founder of Breakthrough Sounds.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for letting us use this place, and
Absolutely.
thank you for being with us on our podcast today.
Yeah,
We're
thank
super
you guys,
grateful.
man.
Thank you for this
very
opportunity.
much.
Well, let's get into it. So, let's rewind. Imagine we meet you before anyone knows you as Charles from Breakthrough Sounds or Kyra as the creative strategist. What's happening in your world creatively in that moment? Just walk us through it.
So
Rewind.
if you were meeting me, for me, this would have been as early as 2017, before I was really ingrained in like the recording world.
Okay.
I was an active artist at that time. You would have been meeting me like, with the band. Probably preparing for one of my releases with Kyra. Maybe met me out at a show or something. But everything was just artist, man. It was musician. And I still have that now. But then that was my sole focus. That was
Solely focused on music.
That's
and
it.
stuff. Yeah.
That's all I wanted to do. Yeah.
Were you playing instruments, or were you producing, or were you doing the whole gamut?
So the quick and dirty is I've always recorded my own music, produced my own music, and did like all my own releasing, all that stuff. 2017, I just started a band because I had a show as a rapper that I bombed at.
Nice.
And after that night, I remember being in the car being so disappointed, but then I just had like this fire under me, like, that's never happening again.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I remember that.
literally, so I put together a band, and like it was Tubi Fresco and the Living Sound, and we were starting to roll, man. We had done a lot of, mind you, we were just performing my music. We didn't like do any studio work as a collective, because the band was like my touring band, like my backing band.
Nice.
So we had eventually ended up doing a lot of stuff, opening for some big artists, a bunch of like venues out of state, in state, so a lot of stuff.
Very cool.
What about even further back? Like, when did you realize?
gosh.
Like, I don't want to, like, we don't have to go through your entire life, but like, there's like a moment I feel like we all have where it's like, I this is where I'm going.
You know what? I will tell you one story. I was in third grade, maybe. So I was just about 10 almost. And 10 years old. And they started these lunchtime talent shows. And like kids would get up and sing or dance or whatever. And I'm like, man, I want to go do something. But I didn't rap, I didn't sing, I didn't do anything. And mind you, I'm like this short, chubby kid with glasses, bro. Like I'm like not the cool guy whatsoever.
It's always a chubby kid, man. I was the same way, man.
I'm telling you,
was.
bro. But long story short, I remember telling my friends, I think I want to rap. I think I want to do. So they're like, you should do it. I'm like, well, I don't got nothing today. I'm going to do it the next time you do it. And I went home. My favorite rapper was Lil Bow Wow. That was my favorite rapper at the time. And he had this song on his Doggy, what was it called? Like Doggy Bag album or something, whatever.
That was like his first one, right?
That was his second album.
Okay.
My mom had just bought it for me the Christmas before, bro. Like, and I the song was number 7. It was called Thank You. And I remember learning the first verse through and through. And the next day, I went to school. They was doing the talent show. I said I wanted to do it. My friend's like, if you get nervous, just look at the clock. That's what I do. I just look at the clock. So I got up there, bro. I started rapping. Mind you, this is a lunchroom full of every grade. Wow. So you got not kindergarten, I don't think was in there, but like first grade to 5th grade. Yeah. Like it was crazy. A lot of kids, because we only had one lunch period. So I rapped. It felt like the whole room was so quiet. I just stared at this clock. Afterward, I was so nervous in my head because I'm like, if I suck, they're gonna like they're gonna ream me, bro. This is over. The entire place like erupted and cheered for me.
Ooh.
At that
That's
moment,
gotta feel so good.
oh
cute.
my gosh. At that moment, I'm like, yo, I think I like doing this.
Yeah.
So that was like that was a big point for me.
That is beautiful.
that.
I love that.
Such
What
a
about
funny
you,
story.
Kyra?
Yeah, I think as you were saying this, I was trying to think like what was my earliest memory, and I think I'm more of a visual artist than Charles is like a music artist. And for me, I remember being in elementary school, and art class was always just such a big deal for me. I loved school, mind you. I was always a very like studious student. I was never upset with going to class and learning, but I specifically remember like anytime I made something in art class and then taking it home as a kid in like the 2nd and 3rd grade, I would just want my parents to put it on the refrigerator. And like, you know, it was something about making something with my hands and having a product from it, and like it was not something we could throw away. Like it was, and my mom pretty much, she still has some of those things from, you know, the 2nd and 3rd grade. But I think that was a first spark for me. And then I guess I'll follow your timeline around like the 2017 time frame. I was in college for graphic design. I was going to Tri-C at that time. And I think right around then was when our paths started to converge, right around like the 2015, 2016 timeline. And I really hadn't been working professionally at all at that point. So I really was just doing schoolwork. And so once Charles came along, he gave me an opportunity to do some work that was not like just schoolwork. I was like, oh, I could. Yeah, he was the guinea pig. Unfortunately, in some ways, for a lot of the things that I did in the beginning. So the first time I picked up a DSLR camera was for one of his shows, and that's where I learned how to like.
Okay, so let me just interrupt.
Yeah.
How y'all meet? Like I never asked.
How do we meet?
Oh my
Okay,
gosh.
do you want to tell the story? You want me
Lord.
to
I'll tell the story.
tell it right?
I am. So we actually were working at Target at the time, and we had been working with each other for a while.
Yeah,
actually, for a few months at least. Never really like we crossed paths, but we wasn't like didn't really.
And I was
like,
friends with Derek first,
literally,
because he was a photographer and graphic designer.
A guy from here named Derek Jerome, and one day I just remember asking Derek, I'm like, who is that?
It always does with that.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
And from there, we kindled a friendship.
yeah.
She learned that because at that time, bro, I definitely had the air of like cool rapper guy.
Oh, of course.
And like I feel like so my sister knew Charles just from like they're closer in age, and so they knew each other just in the world or whatever. And she was like, "Oh yeah, there's like a rapper who works at your job." And I'm like, "Who?" She was like, "Charles." And I'm like, "Charles? Like he's a rapper?" Like because I knew Target Charles. Like I didn't know
Target Charles is a rapper?
as like a rapper. And then I found out it was like he was like living this like Hannah Montana life.
Oh
where
wow,
he was like,
that's hilarious. Miley Cyrus
Right.
over here,
Bro.
You were like this normal
so
guy,
funny.
and then like you got on stage and did your performances. But yeah, it was. I thought it was really cool.
That's cool.
At the time, I mean, you're actually.
Dang. Now she knows me way too well.
Now
It's
it's
been
like,
10 years. It's like, hey, you're just that guy.
Anyway, so you were saying you were in college and then you
Yeah.
did the camera for each show.
Yeah, so did the camera, and then we created like press kits and things like that, which was an opportunity for me to practice doing layout design. And I even submitted it for a school project.
Really?
That I did for him, and
Nice.
That's awesome.
so he gave me like a real muse to work with, and I think naturally it kind of things progress.
You called him a muse.
I know, I love that.
Blushing over here. If you could see.
Oh my gosh. Bro.
But in some ways,
But that's a privilege as a
For
man
real,
to
it
be
is.
called
Yeah.
a muse. So.
It is. And the cool thing was for me, in my years of doing music at that point, because that's 2016, 17, before that, I was doing everything. So I was trying to hire out.
Yeah.
I was trying to
okay.
work with other people, and I would have to get what I get, or I would have to figure out how to do it myself.
Yep.
So when Kyra came along, that was my first time having someone dedicated to actually work on stuff for me.
Yeah, and it was benefiting the both of us.
Literally.
Which that was like the primary thing, was like I was learning and you were willing to just like let me explore and learn, and then you needed the stuff. So I think that like we soon realized that we make good creative partners with each other, and like, you know, at this point we learned how to work together as coworkers, and now it was like, okay, well, how do we work together as collaborators, which that was a little rough, but like we figured it out now.
It
like
always is,
all
though,
this
isn't
time
it?
later.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you guys have your experience, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you know,
Oh, yeah.
your collaborators, and
We're still figuring it out.
yeah, you're still figuring it out.
Takes a while,
Right. So yeah, it's fun though.
It was beautiful though. I love reminiscing on that. That's good.
That's awesome.
So, what was fueling your creativity back then? Like, what was the dream? What was the goal you guys were working creatively towards?
Yeah, I think for me, I remember when I graduated high school, and my dad he did this with me and my two sisters, where he asked like, okay, well, what type of lifestyle do you guys want? You know, and you're going to go online and research that job, look up how much that salary is, look up, you know, if you can afford the car that you might want, or the apartment you might want, or anything like that. And so I remember doing that exercise, and I looked up for a graphic designer because I had at that point thought I probably want to do something in art making. I had done a lot of like traditional art classes, like painting and drawing and things like that, but at that time it wasn't I didn't see it as being the end. I kind of saw myself going further into more of like a digital design route. And so when I looked it up, I was like, oh crap, they don't make very much money. I was like, shoot. I thought, and then that, I feel like my dad's gentle way of saying, I'm not telling you like what to do with your life, but I want you to know that if you make a choice, what that means for you to make that choice. And so then I remember just going, I was planning to go to Cleveland State, and I just put my major as computer science. So I was like, well, I'm just going to do computer science. I would make more money, right?
It's
and
safe. Yeah.
It's safer.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, I like computers. It's, you know, similar design computers, whatever. I could do it. And I got accepted, and I was prepared to go and everything, but I just remember feeling this calling of like, this is not where you're supposed to be. You are supposed to do something else. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to bet on myself, and I'm going to pursue this graphic design dream. And I don't know really what it looks like, and I don't know, you know, who is going to help me throughout this, but I'm just going to trust God, and I'm going to do it. And it's turned out pretty well, and I've been making more than what that initial thing said.
Awesome.
So we're
That's
thankful to
amazing.
God about that.
Yeah.
But it was sort of interesting just in terms of what that drive was. I think it was just that I knew that I wanted more, and like I remember my dad always saying, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. And I was like, I don't really want to work a day in my life. I want to love what I do.
Sure.
And I know if I'm going to have to do it for 40 years or so, you know, I need to love it. And so the money will come, but I think for me that was a big drive. Yeah.
Was that a big, when you made that decision
Yeah.
to leave the computer science way and go towards your art, what did that feel like? Were you like, I'm doubting myself, or like talk us through that experience and what that feels
You know,
like?
I don't even know that I ever really felt a lot of doubt. I just felt
You
like
just
I was
trusted?
like, I think I just trusted that it was going
That's
to work
awesome.
out,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that it's interesting because I don't have a lot of people in the creative arts. Like in my family, my uncle is a chef.
Cool.
So he's probably the closest to it as in terms of culinary art. But I think it was nice because I did have a lot of friends at that time that were. So like Charles was pursuing music, even though that wasn't where he was going to school traditionally. And then our friend Derek, he was going to school for like a multimedia degree as well. So it sort of allowed me to see that people are doing this. And at some point I figure it out, you know, but I wasn't sure how. But I think that I trusted that to some degree I was smart enough to, to not
To figure
like
it out.
to not make the worst decision in the world, and also that that God would lead me. So it's been working out so far.
And you were way more mature at that age than I was. Right? I took computer science
Oh my God.
went to class the first day. After the class, I went straight to registrar's office.
Yeah, you were like, no, take me out of here.
I was
get
like,
it.
there is no way.
I get
Seems
it.
like I'm going to leave this high-paying career and go here, and
Hopefully, right. It's like the crossing. I was definitely crossing my fingers, but
Wow.
you know, you see.
and now you're getting recognized by Cranes Cleveland. I saw that recently.
Yeah.
Congrats on that. I was like,
thank you
holy
so
cow,
much.
that's amazing.
Oh, that's so sweet. Yes,
so
thank
cool.
you.
Yeah.
That was a surprise. Former boss of mine and mentor, same as Jamie Lombardo and Jim O'Hare. They both, I worked for them for a couple of years back before the pandemic, and they nominated me for it. We've just been in touch ever since I left that job, but they've been sort of watching what I've been doing in the community, and
That's cool.
just they've kind of seen all the creative growth. So yeah, it felt really good to be honored, especially
amazing.
so young, I guess you could say. You know, you kind of wait for those things. I'm like, well, maybe when I'm 40 or something like that.
Right,
But
yeah.
it feels good to know that it's being recognized. And I think the biggest thing now is just continue to make impact. So that's my
Right.
biggest thing.
You got to keep it up now.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm like, oh gosh, you don't want to see. Now she's going downhill, everyone. So,
Speak against
yes,
So our podcast-
absolutely.
So our podcast is called the Creative Odyssey Podcast. So it will be wrong if I don't ask you individually, what do you think about creativity and the creative process and how you see it?
Yeah,
Your view it.
I love talking about this.
That's a
You start
heck of
though.
that's a heck of a question.
I gotta ask, you know,
So what do we see about the creativity process?
and the creativity as a whole.
I'll just kind of tell you. You know, it's funny because before working at Breakthrough, creativity for me was like it had become a challenge. It had become kind of like tough because I didn't feel like but now mind you, at the same time, you know, again, this is 2017, 2018, my life was changing. You know, I was starting to become kind of done up with being a rapper. I was, you know, beginning to seek after Christ, you know, around this time. And by the time I gave my life to Christ, I'm like, I don't even know how to write anymore.
Right.
I'm like, I don't even know what I'm going to create anymore at this point. So it become a challenge to, like, you know, actually be creative. It wasn't really until recently, because like since then I've like worked on music. I have like stuff, but it wasn't until recently where I was working on a new song, and for the first time in a long time, and I just remember, like, because normally I'm like, okay, try to, like, you got to write some lyrics, like that's how you start the song. You got to figure out some lyrics. But then I'm like, no, wait a minute. I have clients who literally will just like have stuff that they've hummed. They don't have any lyrics yet, and they just hum melodies.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try that.
That's
You
awesome.
know?
Yeah.
And then, like, I'm working on production for this song, and I'm like, I don't even know where I'm going. But you know what? I'm just gonna go somewhere.
Dude, that's cool.
You know, so for me, creativity, you know, now in light of that, that was like a life-changing moment. And this was just a couple weeks, maybe a week or so ago.
Wow.
And that was so, you know, affecting, because I'm like, I don't have to be confounded to one way. You know, creativity is like unconfound. Like there is no boundary to the proper process.
Yeah.
You know, so
and you felt like you had to stick to this for so long because that's
so
the way you
long.
did it.
That's the literal way I did it. I mean, even when I was a kid, I had a rap group, and mind you, we were 13 years old. I'm up here writing out plans for us for the next 5 years. We don't even got a song recorded. But though that was cool to begin ideating, what that built in me was an expectation of this unrealistic order.
Yeah.
And unrealistic,
Yeah.
like just unrealistic expectations as far as how I think this is supposed to go, the best way I know this is supposed to go.
Yep.
And that followed me throughout my whole music career.
Yeah.
And that time last week when I did that was the first time I had ever done it, and it was liberating.
Yeah.
I ended up writing the song a day later because I was just able to just be free, just to ideate through.
I love that.
It's my first time ever been able to do that. So
I love that.
That's how creativity, like, that's my vantage point of it. Right?
I can even imagine writing lyrics and writing music. I can never do that. So the fact that I'm like, oh, I could never do that.
But you can. You think you can, but you can't.
For real.
No, actually, that's true. You're right.
What he's
You're right.
saying here is like,
You just
you don't have to be stuck doing the same thing
Yeah.
you're doing.
That is so
Yeah.
true. That is
Yeah.
so true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Lately, I've been doing that thing where like ChatGPT prompts. Like if I'm stuck creatively,
Yeah.
I'm like, give me a prompt to get my mind going. So I like start writing.
Nice.
That's
That's
really
smart.
good.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
smart.
That's a good way to inspire.
That
Yeah.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
Talking to a robot. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're okay. You're okay. I really love talking about this subject, and I can go on for a very long time, but I'll pull myself in, and that's why I love your videos so much, because you talk about creativity in such a understandable and digestible way. I think a lot of people are afraid of creativity because they think it requires some sort of special skill. For me personally, I believe that we are all creative as human beings. The act of being human is a creative act in itself, and so we are all innately creative, and so. The first thing I always like to talk about when it comes to creativity is there are some myths that we have to first dispel. And I think you would agree with some of these. I think the first one is that it's magic. I think a lot of people think that being creative means that, it's just come upon me and it's like my eureka moment and I'm just like suddenly a spark of inspiration and I'm super creative. But to Charles' point, creativity can be stimulated and it can be created. And that's also the point that you were making about ChatGPT. And so if we can unlock areas within our own brains and our own creative processing, then we can get to more creative results. So that's number one. And then I think number two is that creativity is a completely original. Like you have to, in order to be creative, you have to be completely original. You have to make something new that no one's ever seen before. But so much of creative works are the result of remixing, combinations, and new ways of approaching the same idea. So I think that's important to remember, that creativity isn't reinventing the wheel, but it's maybe just looking at the wheel from a different angle.
I love that. That's great.
And then the last thing about creativity, so we talked about that it's not the instantaneous moment and it's not the completely original, but then I also think creativity is people think that you have to be born a certain way, right? Like there are people that I think that are typically more inclined to creativity. Like you might have a person that you know in your life and you're like, man, they're just like so creative, like they do art so well or whatever it is, and like they are more inclined to think more imaginative than some others are. But I think that is more of an intentional exercise that they've exposed themselves to over and over in time. And as we grow and as we become adults, we lose some of our imaginative nature, and that makes us sometimes feel less creative, or that muscle has not been exercised, right? And so we're like, oh, I'm not creative, but it's more of just like the muscle hasn't been exercised, right? Like I fully understand that I have the potential to do a cartwheel, but like I haven't done it since I was 5, right?
Yeah.
So if I don't do it since I'm 5, then I probably am out of practice. And we were all, I mean, how many of us were so creative as kids and we were so imaginative, and we've lost that. And so there's a book that I was reading. I can't remember the full title, but it's about creative problem solving. And the author talks about how creativity is the combination of knowledge and in imagination. And so as kids are high in imaginative thought, but they're low in experience. And then as adults, we're high in experience, but we're low in imaginative thought because we tend to find ourselves locking into the ways of doing things, right? As you mentioned, we're usually looking for the place of least resistance or looking for the easiest way to do something. And so I think in order to be more creative, it's forcing yourself into more imaginative thought, asking yourself what if rather than what is all the time. So that's my long answer.
That's cool.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's good.
It's like the thing about creativity is like I think from my education and my background, it's always like been for creative stuff like art and music and whatnot. Like nobody told me to help me think like, oh, creative thinking is like engineering.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
absolutely.
And there's this like division that we were always like, oh, you're the music person, so
Right.
you're the creative guy. You do sports, so you're not that creative.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I realized the imagination part, I really like that. It's like we as adults, if you want to be creative, you actually need to learn how to imagine.
Yes.
So like so a real quick story. I told you I won't do it, but I'm going to do it now. I talk a lot. But
We love it.
so I watch dogs at my home during the daytime, and
Nice.
there my basement. I have a nice area, and that's where my desk is now too. Where you edit there. And every time I go downstairs, if my wife sees my journal, she's like, she knows I won't be coming for the next 3 hours. Because I just go into the imagination world and like possibilities and just like ideas and just like with hanging out with dogs. It's like a dopamine like world of fun. And it's now that I can do that because I'm more free. There are no restrictions whatsoever. So 100% agree with everything you said.
Yeah, it's like
I love that.
it's a muscle that you work out continually, and if you let it atrophy, you're gonna feel like you're not creative.
Right.
That's the way it is.
Right.
Yep.
Absolutely.
That's really
Absolutely.
I kind of want to shift to the Renaissance.
Yes, let's go.
So I think we can all agree that there is some type of creative renaissance going
Yeah.
in Cleveland right now, and I just want to know, what roles do you think that creatives could play in making sure that we accurately narrate the story of this renaissance?
Well, can I ask you how you all are defining Renaissance, just so that we're aligned?
No, great question back. I think that the people that I've talked to feel like this kind of awakening in the creative realm, kind of a rebirth. I mean, that's the kind of the definition of what Renaissance is. But it feels like there's this shift that Cleveland, I feel like it was sort of ushered in when LeBron was in, like kind of put us in the spotlight.
Yeah.
And it's
Good
kind of
point.
been like bubbling under the surface. And
Yeah.
I feel like people are like, actually, we are something. We
Yes.
can do something.
Yes.
So that's kind of what I feel like, what I've seen and when I've talked to other people too, what we're kind of experiencing now. And I feel like you feel that, right?
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
feel it.
Yeah.
And even creatively too, as like I mean, I'm always at these creative groups and meetups, and I've never seen this like underground movement where like people are excited to collaborate and they have ideas bursting, waiting to do stuff, and that's kind of what I mean. And yeah, like the question, like my thing was like, the mayor is doing such a good job trying to like get all these things in line and make all the big changes.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important as creatives, we need to find a way to tell a story,
Yeah.
narrate
Yeah.
this well, because this
Yeah.
could go either way.
That's good. I'll start it. I think that in order for creatives to properly narrate the story, I would say I think we first have to make ourselves a part of the story.
Yeah, I agree.
Because there's a big side of the creative community in the creative world. There's a lot of talk right now about, kind of systemically changes and like how can we get these organizations and these big corporations to, come in alignment with what the independent creative needs are and so forth, so on. Yeah, cool conversation, good points. Are we going to wait on that? No.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, I can be a part of this story even at the level I'm at. If I don't have the if Cleveland Clinic isn't commissioning me for $5,000 to paint a mural, that's okay.
Yeah.
I can still go and let me find a local restaurant that's about to open and offer my services to them, you know, and if they have a budget, great. If not, hey, what can we do for me to get my recognition of this and still do this work, because I want to leave my mark. I want to leave my imprint, right?
Yeah.
A lot of, I don't want to go on a tangent, y'all. Y'all about to get me here. A lot of this will also include losing a sense of entitlement. Entitlement meaning, even though I'm what could be considered a good artist, doesn't mean I'm owed anything.
Yep. Yes.
I have to
Well
make my mark. You know, and in the music world, we learned this the hard way, because we'll have people to our face tell us what you import wordage, right?
Yeah.
So I think as a general creative society here in Cleveland during this Renaissance, because there is a lot more than I have ever seen with art here happening right now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's beautiful. We just have to kind of hone it in and find our way to make our mark, and not wait for a systemic change to do so.
Yeah.
Not wait for, well, I think that you guys should recognize me because I've done. No. Whether you recognize me or not, you're going to see me.
Yeah.
You're going to you're going to see my imprint left, because I'm a part of this. I'm a part of this story.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that.
To piggyback off of what you're saying there, I think Cleveland is a really interesting city, because I think historically we were really an industry-driven city with oil and, you know, the steel and everything like that. And so we had much more of a industry like led mindset. And so in more recent years, we've had to kind of flip, well, what does Cleveland deliver to the world, right? How do we no longer be that mistake on the lake and all of that sort of thing, where we kind of was this forgotten city or broke city or whatever it may be. And so I think that there are smart people that are realizing that we really do have an advantage by having the art museum here, which is the second best art museum in the world, and the orchestra and the rock hall. And so making a lot of investment in that is super positive. So when it comes to what creatives can do, I think part of it is understanding how to add value to the business community that is here. So I think that a lot of times creatives don't quite know how to articulate what is the value of creativity, and why it actually makes societies and people better, and like how does it improve overall like well-being. And so the more that we can communicate that story to people about what we do, that's what gets the dollars, more than just that it's beautiful or it's great to listen to, but that it actually has a tangible effect on society. It brings in money, and that's what a lot of obviously business owners or economic developers, that's what they want to know, is that can what you do make us money? And I think that's part of our onus, is making sure that we know how to communicate that story of what we do for others. So.
It's not just looking nice, but there's a deeper meaning.
Right.
And I love what you said too, about one thing that I understand about this creative world and what's happening in the creative world is it's all about grants and money and funding. I hear that everywhere. But I don't see people collaborating. Like our podcast is a great example of what that looks like, right? Like I always wanted to start a podcast, but I was waiting for the right person, because I knew doing it by myself was too much. So when we got together, you're like, okay, you have cameras, I have cameras, you got a drone, I got mics, whatever. And now we are doing something. And the point is to like bring out creativity and get more people to do the same, because like you said, we can't just wait, because when we first started, we were using our phones to record the podcast.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
first episode was our phones.
Yeah.
It was absolute crap, but
You gotta use what you got.
and then we just like leveled up one thing
That's
after
right.
the other.
That's right.
But the point is, we weren't waiting.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, let's do it.
The key is to start, because I feel
The
like
key is to
like
start.
you
That's it.
said, a lot of
Yeah.
people are like, well, but I don't know. I only have
Nah.
a 2-year-old phone.
Yeah.
I started Breakthrough Sounds with $3,000.
Let's go.
Wow.
That's all I had. That was every amount of money I had in my pocket.
You started.
I started.
You brought them to
That's awesome.
silence, man.
No, I
It's
love
like-
that. I love it.
Yes.
You
Tell me
started.
that journey
That's
briefly.
huge.
Yes, people need to hear
Oh,
this.
man.
Has he ever talked about that?
I don't think so.
No,
That's
okay,
why I
alright.
think
No,
you need
He's
to
the
tell
real
it.
clip.
Not-
Let's go. we gotta. You heard the exclusive on.
You heard it here first, guys.
You guys are crazy.
dude.
The journey of Breakthrough Sounds, man. I was engineering a buddy from high school. I started working with him in 2015. Learned quickly that I loved to engineer because that was my first time doing it for anybody else. And from there, the idea of opening a studio, it was there, but I didn't even have a car. So I was working with him at Tri-C Eastern Campus. They don't have recording studios, but they have the music booths with the pianos. Yeah. So myself and my older brother, we were very, I can't say good friends with the professor, but we were close with the professor, Professor Richard Hallsworth, and he would let me come in and utilize the music booth. So one would be my control room. My buddy would bring his laptop. I would bring everything else: speakers, mics, stands, cables, and then the other booth would be my the vocal booth. And it was cables running under doors. Learned never to do that again. It wasn't the best for the cables. But long story short, again, I learned really quickly that I loved it, and wanted to open a studio. Didn't have money. Didn't have a car, so I dropped it. Come 2018, I started working in another studio downtown. First studio I ever worked in. It was great. I wanted to open a studio come that September, but I'm like, I'm in contract with these guys for at least a year. 2 weeks later, that studio closed.
Wow.
2 weeks later, that studio closed.
I love that.
I called Kyra maybe a week. I might have mentioned it. I might have mentioned it like after the studio closed that I wanted to open up a studio, and it was just like, oh, okay. Come December, I told Kyra, I'm like, yo, I think I'm gonna do this, and she's like, Charles.
Yeah, I know.
Like, dude, are you ready? But I was in prayer and I had just joined the church. It was a lot of newness. And after that, that December, I made my first $800, saved my first $800.
Nice.
And that was what I needed for the deposit for the space. I found the space on Facebook, put a deposit on the space in downtown Bedford. I lost my job that February, got another job, left that job, got in a car accident, totaled my car, got a job where I was making under half, almost a half of the job I had just left, and we were supposed to open in 26 days. This is June at this point. So many things occurred during this process. But one thing that I knew when I got into my car accident, this is hilarious. When I got into my car accident, I remember it because I had just left church. I was going to the studio to install the lights in the ceiling. And when I got into the accident, I just remember the boxes of lights just jumping in my back seat.
Oh, man.
It was insane. It was so movie-esque, bro. You just hear rattling all over the place. I knew that no matter what, I can't stop.
Yeah.
I knew I can't stop. Now, mind you, again, all this is on $3,000.
Right.
That $800 was a part of the $3,000.
Yeah. Geez.
So literally, we bought. I spent $1,400, maybe $1,500, on drywall, wood, insulation, the doors that we needed for the booth, the glass, small glass for the window. I spent maybe $500 on gear.
Yeah. Where'd
No,
you get the board
that's
from?
insane.
You got the board from Facebook?
I got the board. No,
Or-
that first board I bought for $250 from Facebook.
Yeah.
Like literally, this is bootstrapped to the T.
Wow.
And we opened and we got active. Right? I had one mic, AKG Perception 220. That is a $90 mic. I recorded at the other studio on that mic, and I recorded my first like 2 or 3 dozen sessions with that mic.
Wow.
Until I could afford to get a better mic. And from there, I remember December came actually, of 2019. And I went to work at Guitar Center. That's where I had started working. Went to work at Guitar Center, got into it with a manager, and I'm like, you know what? Thank y'all for this opportunity, but I'm gone. I had no plan. I never planned on running Breakthrough without another job. And I got out of church that day. Just so happened, everybody stayed at church. So I went back because I didn't know where to go. And I walk in, my pastor seen me. So she took me into the office, and I'm explaining to her. I'm telling her, I'm like, I don't know. I just opened this business. I don't got no job. And she looked at me, and she's like, look for an increase at the studio. Expect an increase at the studio. January comes, top of January. This is 2020, right before COVID.
Oh.
Yeah. It's worse and worse. They're like,
Right
what?
before COVID.
Oh, this is like a roller coaster.
It is. It is.
roller coaster.
Now, right before COVID, January is here. Mind you, we're a couple sessions pop up here and there. I get notifications on my phone whenever something's booked. Me and my other engineer, Ryan, I'm in session. Ryan's not there. I get a notification. Somebody booked Ryan for a session. I'm like, okay, cool. 5 minutes later, another notification. I think that one might have been for me. I'm like, okay, great. Cool. We got some sessions on schedule. About 10 minutes later, another notification. 5 minutes after that, another notification.
Wow.
I text him. I'm like, what's going on? I probably can still find the text message
Wow.
where I'm like, what's happening right now?
Yeah.
And ever since then, we were rolling. We had to close for a month and a half for COVID. We opened back up.
No.
We haven't slowed down since.
Wow, dude.
Yeah.
And it's all by the grace of God.
Amen.
$3,000 and prayer.
I'll say, geez, that's for that increase. That's
Seriously.
amazing.
It was
Yeah.
it was powerful. I looked at my pastor. I'm like, what?
Right.
Like, do you know what like is like?
Right.
Do you know this industry? Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean look for an increase?
Yeah.
I'm like, people know me as an artist. They don't know me as an engineer.
True.
But that was more of a help than a hurt. You know?
Were you struggling with imposter syndrome at the time when you started?
Oh, dude, man, looking at these other studios, Kyra knows, because we
Yeah.
had a whole lot of conversations
Yeah.
about, yo, this studio and this studio, man, look at them, look at us. Like,
Right.
this is not really, but the thing that I remember after we got into space, it took us a minute to like furnish it, get a plant down
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
We were in the basement of an office building, so it was like,
Wow.
but it took us a minute to like build an aesthetic, like in the room. And I remember looking at it one day and being like, it's not them, but this is us, and
Yes.
I love it.
Yes.
Like I
think-
remember just being in the space, looking around it, like, yo, this is like our space, bro.
Yeah.
This was a one studio facility. We had our control room, a little makeshift lobby, a vocal booth, and what was a live room that we had to end up turning to a temporary Studio B because we had too many clients. Wow. We had to convert that live room to a temporary studio because we were rolling. And I'm like, I'm not about to miss this.
Yeah.
We're not doing
Not gonna
that
turn
mini
anybody
band
down.
recording, so let's go ahead and convert this. you
Yeah,
know?
I think that Breakthrough Sounds is a perfect example of what it means to be imaginative in a way, right? To bring the conversation back around, because we really didn't know from the beginning 6 years ago what it would become or how we would move forward. We did not have a plan, but I think we continued to ask the question, well, what if we add a photo video space, and then what if we turn that space into a venue, and then what if we expand to this other side and have a podcast room, and then what if we put art on the wall?
Yeah,
Like we
seriously.
continue
All
to
of these were
ask
questions.
those questions and pursue those questions and be okay with not fitting into the box. I think we were just talking last week about, that I don't think that either of us were ever meant to fit in a box in the first place, because we were supposed to create something that was for those outside the box. So, and that's where, breakthrough really has come out of that place.
Wow,
So.
it's truly a breakthrough. So then,
It really is.
so what you're saying is, don't wait till the $1 million budget for all the amenities you need to provide.
That's it, bro.
Yeah.
We still don't got $1 million budget. I feel like we still bootstrapping, but we're in a better position because we just did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful story. It has so many analogies for so many creatives who are like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I don't know where to start.
Yeah,
It's
seriously.
like, dude, follow
Just
this
start.
guy's example.
Yep.
Just start.
Just start.
Yep.
Do what you can. And I know
Yeah.
we're running up on time.
Can we do one last question?
Yeah.
before
Do we
we
have
go?
time?
Because I really want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how has it been together? Like, how has being together changed the way you see yourself as creatives? Has your relationship ever challenged your creative identity, pushed it forward, or made you question it? So, I'll ask. Should I ask again? Or?
Interesting. Wow.
That's a great
Well,
question.
I'll start with saying it's definitely takes growth. Like I think we've been talking about this definitely more recently, where we're like, wow, we're like definitely on the same page more than we used to be. But I think that part of it is putting the ego to the side, and I think some of it was natural growth, and I think God doing work on both of our hearts individually. Where I'll even say for myself, in the beginning when Charles was performing and things like that, people sort of knew me, but it was like, oh, you're always like with Charles, and that kind of was like, for me, I'm like, what? I want my own identity.
Oh my gosh.
So he's like, what do you want me to do about it?
Everybody,
Right.
this is my girl.
Right, and that's how it was. But then I realized that number one, it was a pleasure to be able to support your creative career, but then also that I could design my own individually. And so I think like us understanding and respecting the boundary that we both have, and like we both have our own individual careers, and like we come in and complement each other's careers in like significant ways. So when I'm like, hey, I need audio, he's like, or I need somewhere to like host like AIGA events or whatever it may be.
If
That's what we,
I know you're somewhere in the
right,
Hey.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
I think that's a great segue.
Yeah.
Because for me, coming off the heels of that, of being like, yo, I'm this active musician and my girl is here with me, she's supporting me, cool. The tides have certainly shifted.
Yeah.
And I remember being at an event with Kyra, and Kyra's just social butterfly, bro. Like, she's talking, she's just doing her thing. And I'm standing there, I'm like,
Yep.
I'm Charles, guys. Hi. Hi, guys. But I felt such a sense of like joy and being proud of watching that.
Thanks.
Because I'm like, yo, and I've said this to her multiple times. I remember when you was my tag along. I'm your tag along.
Depends on what it is.
But I think the thing is, just in all seriousness, learning the dynamic of one another, the growth in Christ, I think, has been one of the biggest things.
I would agree.
Because you lose arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
You lose pride around, inside of that. I have no issue going somewhere with Kyra and she is the center of attention because most of the time I don't want to talk to people. Just call it for what it is. I don't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah. And I'll just say also, and this is where I think you guys can probably relate as well, is when you work so closely with someone, you can understand where they may struggle, and like you get to kind of see that place and support them in that place, and you can receive that support as well. And then you can also have truth with that person, like those honest conversations that you have to have. And I think everybody needs a creative partner like that, where you can say like, hey, you can improve this. Charles, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't have to be like criticizing me or whatever. But there's a lot of times where I'm like, that makes me a better creative. Like
And
that
I'm gonna
you
do
are
it anyway.
yes, right, exactly. Where I'm like, okay, I could have changed my tone of how I address that issue, or working with a client in a better way, or something like that. So making sure having those relationships in your life that makes you better at your creativity, and that you can also be vulnerable and say, like, I don't know what to do, I screwed up, and you don't feel like you have to be the perfect version of yourself. So I think that's been really helpful too.
There is a nice sense when you can screw up and not be like blasted for it, or feel like you might be.
Right.
That's very important, because this is creativity as a career is stressful.
Yeah.
Because like when you're just doing it, I mean, I think it's stressful even when you're just doing it at your leisure too. Depending upon, I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna say that it depends on what's happening up here in your mind. Because for me, it got to a point where it was stressful because of everything else that was going on here. But creativity as a career, your outlet is now your everyday. So it's no longer the getaway because I'm always in it. Right?
Yeah.
So having someone that's a confidant who understands, and in this case is creative themselves, is like, okay, you get it. So I'm able to release here and like get feedback that's accurate. Not saying that others can't give you feedback,
Right.
It's different when somebody that understands your field better than somebody who's not in it can give you that constructive criticism or that feedback or even advice and direction. So I think that is that not alone, but is a large part.
Yeah, because we've already gotten past the phase of you needing to like me. So I don't really care about you needing to like me at this point. Which
I'm
is
still there with Sharon.
No.
That's so funny, man.
One last thing. So our audience is mainly creative people, mainly people who want to be creative, and also people who are closeted creatives who don't think of themselves as creative. So
That's good.
knowing that audience, I'm going to just leave the floor up to you two to talk to them and say something inspiring or not. Anything related to creativity. You can look at the camera.
Oh, look at the camera.
Yeah, well,
Okay. Well, the first thing I'll say is that creativity is a journey, and to go on that journey and explore. So much of what we do as creatives, it starts in our minds. And so if we limit our thinking and we limit our possibilities, we limit our creativity. So find the ways that you can to unlock your creativity by releasing your mindset into what's possible. So be more imaginative, approach creativity with a sense of play, and don't try to figure out the outcome, but just go on the journey.
Love that.
That's good, man. What would I say to a closeted creative, someone who doesn't think they're creative but they really are? You lose nothing by trying. I think for me that was my thing. I didn't know if I was actually going to end up being a good rapper. I was just like, you know what? I want to do it, so I'm going to try it. I don't know if it's going to work, but
You lost nothing and gained all of this.
dude, you know, and that is a testament to, like, even just, Scripture talks about, mustard seed of faith. Sometimes I felt like I had a half a mustard seed, but it was still able to blossom. And I wasn't afraid because of what was in front of me to still try. I think that's the thing that I would belabor to any creative or impending creative, is that you lose nothing by just trying. And if it doesn't work, try again, right? It's no loss there. Yeah.
Don't be afraid to be silly.
Yeah, don't be
Yeah.
afraid to be silly. Don't be afraid to do something that now in in moderation,
You don't need another Weird Al.
Don't like, Mom, I'm gonna buy Texas. Maybe let's scale that down a bit.
Maybe a little bit.
But if you're like, hey, I think I want to develop a museum, or hey, I think I want to develop this program or this podcast or this music project or whatever the case may be. To some, it'll seem crazy. It'll seem so silly. Yeah. My mom told me when I told her I wanted to make music, she was like, I don't care what you do. Finish school. You do whatever you want to do. Everybody doesn't necessarily have that.
Yeah.
But I was prepared, especially as I got older, to encounter somebody to say, listen, you need to get a job.
Right.
You need to do something that's whatever. I was prepared to hear that because I was still going to move toward my passion.
Right.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to try.
Great.
That's great. Well, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You guys are awesome.
This was
such a good time.
This was so fun.
Seriously.
Thank you. That's all for the Creative Odyssey Podcast. Till the next time, keep creating, keep dreaming, and keep exploring your own creative odyssey. Thank you all.
That's right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So glad we did it.